Welcome to Business Talk here on Business Tech with me, Michael Avery. And really, without you, the viewers, we wouldn't have had the run that we've had over the last 18 months. Breaking 1 million views on South Africa's largest news website. It really has shown how remarkably resilient and how highly adaptable creatures we human beings are. And it took a pandemic to make that plainly obvious. And consider how much we have changed in that 18 months since the WHO declared COVID to be a pandemic. Governments and businesses taking the virus seriously and issuing shelter in place and work from home orders and getting familiar with Zoom and Teams. But as resilient as we are, I'm also reading stories of great resignation waves now, of stress-related burnout and fatigue. So we are, after all, only human, as my next guest, I'm sure, understands all too well. Emma Durkin, Head of Human Capital at Altron. Welcome to the show, Emma.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, we are more than 18 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, actually, and I suppose one can find hundreds of analyses about how COVID has impacted South Africa's economy. And if we were to do a stock take, so to speak, you believe that the most important resources to rebuilding the economy are human capital. It's the people, the employees inside your organizations. Can you just elaborate on why that now, more than infrastructure or how you allocate capital, for example, is the most important consideration?
Yeah, 100%, Michael. I mean, I really stand by that. I mean, people are at the heart of what we do. It obviously does depend on what industry you are in. We're in a very people-intensive industry, technology consulting. So we need people to deploy solutions on our client sites and client projects to ensure that digital transformation. So for us, people are at the heart of every single thing that we do. We have experienced, like you touched on in your introduction, a massive resignation wave. I think it was probably starting in about March of this year. It started trickling in, but we're feeling the full wave of it now. And it really is for multiple reasons. We can go on into that later. But if we don't look after the people now, this scarce skills, little bump that we're going through is very, very soon going to become a crisis. And that's really what we want to avoid.
And we're seeing it all over the world. This is not a unique phenomenon to South Africa. And there's such an interesting sociological take on why we're seeing this great resignation. And we'll come into that. But looking at the job market, we do face a crisis as a result of not only the resignations we're seeing, there's a brain drain in the country, and it seems to be accelerating. Do you think we're unique here in terms of the global trends that we're seeing, specifically around the brain drain?
Yeah, so specifically around the brain drain, no, we're not unique. You know, that has hit other countries within Africa and globally. Look at Zimbabwe, look at Nigeria. So the brain drain, I should say, isn't a South African phenomenon. However, what we are seeing now is, especially like I said, since about March this year, on the back of COVID, when international borders started to open again, we're seeing the emigrations are picking up substantially. So essentially in 2021, very few emigrations for obvious reasons. Borders were closed. It was a global pandemic. What we're seeing now is essentially 18 months worth of brain drain in a matter of a few months. You know, as industries are opening again, people are becoming a little bit more confident about business. They're recruiting, and they're recruiting aggressively, particularly in the tech area. And that is that scarce skill area in which we operate.
Yeah, we're sadly saying goodbye to friends of ours that are going to Ireland to take up a very senior level position in a global multinational, and they've been headhunted, and it really runs to that point. That's what we're seeing now. If you were to say, amongst the key reasons people are leaving, what would, because I know there's a lot of negativity around South Africa, and a lot of people saying, well, the brain drain, immigration is really thanks to Eskom and all of the other issues around load shedding and crime. What are you picking up as the main reasons that people are leaving?
In terms of immigration?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Again, it's not a new story. It's been, the brain drain's been around for decades. It's been felt, it's been talked about, it's been written about. So those same reasons are there. It's those socio-political reasons. specific to South Africa, disillusionment with the government, load shedding, high unemployment, poverty. What we found a big wobble within our employee grouping was the unrest in Durban, and that touched on Gauteng earlier this year. That really instigated quite a big wave of emigrations in our environment.
If people are just leaving their jobs to maybe find another employer, or they just want a sabbatical, why are people leaving their jobs?
Leaving their jobs on a larger scale, I mean, it really is, okay, there's the immigration story. We've talked about that. We've got the financial. Financial is a massive motivator for leaving. Again, we're coming off the back of 18 months of a pandemic where there were salary cuts. You know, and businesses were fighting to stay stable and to stay open. So a lot of people were subjected to salary cuts. Inflation has risen. The cost of living is high now, and essentially people are leaving to get more money. I mean, it really is as simple as that. You know, we have a lot of families, you know, who the other breadwinner in the family, the partner, the spouse, whoever it is, have lost their job. Again, on the back of COVID. So there's an awful lot of people under an awful lot of financial strain at the moment. Basically leaving a job, resigning and joining, even if it is a local company, you're essentially guaranteeing a 10 to 20% increase in your earning power. That is very alluring, and it's very, very attractive.
And I think for companies, if they want to retain their best talent, they need to be ahead of that curve to say, right, well, you know, we had to respond during the pandemic by potentially not giving bonuses or even cutting salaries back. But we've seen now the economy is bouncing back, and people are looking at this and saying, well, are we going to see a reversion back to what the long-term mean was in terms of what my salaries were?
Yeah. And a lot of companies, Altron Karabina is no exception. I mean, we're looking at market-related salary bandings. We're trying to adjust them to market-related. But what you're finding, Michael, especially in this scarce skill tech space at the moment, and we specialize in Microsoft skills, is there is a little bit of a feeding frenzy out there. So if you give a 10% increase, you know the competitor is going to give a 20% increase. So there's a lot of counter offers going on in the market. So finding those the market related salary bands is actually quite hard, because they're very, very agile at the moment. And there's always someone out there who will pay more for that particular skill because of the scarcity of the skill.
And I mean, is it just financial, or are people now also looking for all of those additional workplace new normals, so to speak, where if you've got a young family, for example, and you've seen that you can work remotely through the pandemic, this gives you the flexibility perhaps that you've always been looking for, to go and pick up the kids, come back home, continue with your work, and not have to navigate through traffic potentially if you live far from the office. So it is now just more, I think, for companies, would you say, a complete package when you've got to look at how you retain these top talented employees?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it really is a package. And the financial part, that's really the hygiene part of it. So, you know, you can get that right, you can get it wrong. You know, it's a little bit up in the air at the moment. But those intangible benefits are incredibly powerful. You know, if you're a company and you went, like we did, 100% remotely within 2 weeks of the lockdown being announced, people got very, very used to that flexibility. It's not the work-life balance anymore. It's almost like a work-life blend. And it was very attractive to many. You know, there's cost savings involved. There's no more petrol. The petrol costs are going up. You know, some people cancelled childcare because they were at home. You know, and that flexibility of being there for your family is incredibly attractive. So the forward-thinking companies cannot lose that impetus that COVID gave us in terms of moving to remote working. We've got to keep that flexibility. In our environment, for example, we support almost a hybrid way of working. We want to keep the flexibility, but we also want to start encouraging more in-person events. Come into the office. We've got a beautiful campus here now, because there are certain engagements that you can't do over Zoom and you can't do over Teams. You need that for the innovation, for the team building. You actually need those in-person events, and that's what we're trying to encourage, to get that healthy blend. And also very, very important for the retention story we're talking about, what we're finding with 100% remote working is that employee-employer relationship has degraded quite substantially. You know, that feeling of belonging to a company culture, that is degraded with 100% remote working. So we're just trying to get that back, because let's face it, it's very hard. It's very easy, I should say, to leave a company that you have no personal connection to. You just hand in your resignation and you move off to the next one. So we want to try and reverse that a little bit.
It's incredible what we're witnessing, isn't it? Because we spoke about this prior to COVID. I remember talking about the future trends were all going to be remote working, and this is the future, and shared co-working spaces. We're then thrust into it, in this grand experiment through the pandemic, and we're now realizing, well, in certain areas maybe you can, but certainly over the long term, increasingly, this is what I'm picking up from the executives that I chat to, of some of the big banks, Sim Shabalala, Alan Pullinger, all telling me that yes, that remote is going to stay, but it's going to be hybrid, because you just can't build culture over Team or Zooms and build this connection with your employees where, and really, who said strategy eats culture for breakfast? Or the other way around, I can't remember, but it is so important. I mean, it is really one of the binding ingredients inside a corporate is that culture and developing that. And I think aligned to that as well is mental wellness. And what we are seeing, I'm certainly seeing signs of burnout in my immediate circle, because, we're no longer working from home. We're living at work, and a lot of A-type personalities don't know when to switch off. So now you're working 14, 16-hour days. What are you seeing?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly the trend we're seeing, Michael, as well. And it's one of the big reasons for people leaving. It's obviously in the last 18 months, we've been inundated with the physical impact of COVID, the illnesses, and all of that. But the psychological impact of COVID, I believe, is actually probably going to endure even longer than the physical impact. And we're seeing it time and time again. We see it at work. We see it at home. People taking time off literally for burnout. They actually can't cope anymore. Whether it's digital exhaustion, whether it is the longer work hours, but also there's that element of, human beings, we're so resilient. But if you look back and if you really think about it, it's 18 months worth of a completely rejig of your life. There's the fear of people dying. There's the actual fact of people dying close to us. There is the repeated lockdowns. You're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this. There's that the isolation and loneliness. That's something that we're really, really finding coming through strong, where people, especially if they're living on their own or even just in a small bubble, them and their wife or husband and their kids, the social anxiety comes in as well. So we're seeing it come through strongly. What we encouraged the Altron Karabina, we increased employee feedback loops. Because we're all working remotely, we started to do more pulse surveys. And the one we ran last week was a question on mental and physical impact of COVID on you. And it was a massive, just under 80% of our respondents reported increased feelings of anxiety, increased feelings of depression, loneliness, isolation. It's a worry, but it's a very, very real problem at work and at home. And we're trying to address that. What we've actually done at Altron Karabina, I've got my entire team of people managers going through a mental health first aider accreditation course. And it really is so we can spot, as first line, we can spot the signs of burnout, of increased anxiety and depression, and get in there, work with our employee wellness providers like ICAS and other people like that to provide professional help for those people, and by extension their families as well, because it's a very, very serious problem.
And sounds, Emma, like something, I mean, that's both frightening on the one hand, that stat of 80%, but also very encouraging to hear that you've taken such a proactive approach here. What would you, as a lesson here for other businesses, advise they do to ensure that they can stay ahead of a burnout becoming a little bit more endemic inside the organization? Is it just about touching base with your employees more frequently? How do you do that in a remote environment?
Yeah, I mean, it is touching base. I mean, I think at this time as well, I've seen the trend in a lot of companies where they've scaled back in their HR teams or their people teams and that. I think for the brave companies, it's actually time to put your shoulder behind people-focused teams who, whether it's your current leadership layer and really teach them on how to manage teams in this new way of work, because the old style does not work anymore. In Altron Karabina, we've got a team of people managers, sometimes called HR, but we do HR, but that's not what we lead with. And that is a high touch people management, putting people first approach, where they give scale to the line managers, and we're constantly in touch with people in terms of obviously their employee journey, their career journey, but we partner with them to actually make sure that we are their safe space so they can come to us. They can talk to us. There's no career limiting conversations. If they're struggling, we can provide the help that they need to help them, and by extension, like I said before, their family members. So it's time to change the way of HR and to really put the people first. It's not about staff numbers anymore. It's about the individual human being.
And I think you touched on a very important point there, no career limiting conversations, because I think it's almost, we have these talks around mental health as well. And how do we destigmatize that? Because it's often seen that if you talk about your mental health, then you're going to be seen to be weak, and then you won't get the next project, you won't get the next, increase or the next, appointment. And so, we need to talk about this through that lens of, these are extraordinary, unusual times that we're living through. And within that, remote working does look like it's going to stay now. How do you see this new world of work evolving? Is it going to be just pure hybrid? What do you see it looking like in terms of the impact, if we look at the rearview mirror, that it has had on the workforce and employers and employees through all of these things that we've just discussed?
Yeah, I think, we're living through unprecedented times. There is no doubt about it. And I think right now we're finding the real impacts of COVID and this strange way of life that we adapted to so quickly. I mean, I must admit, I was surprised at my resilience that we adapted to it so quickly. But right now we've almost got to normalize our way of work, and it is a different way of work. Remote working absolutely is here to stay. Like I said, unless you're a mobile worker and your job is out, and you never come into an office, and at Altron, we completely support hybrid for the reasons I gave before. You still need that sense of belonging, and there are certain initiatives and meetings that you can't have virtually. So I think hybrid is here to stay. I do worry sometimes because I see the traffic in the morning and the afternoons, and it seems like the old rush hours have come back. And that's an indication for me that, oh my word, everyone's going back to normal. And that will break companies. If we're looking, especially in the scarce skill area, people can pick and choose where they work. If you don't think out of the box, follow international trends, or even look inside your organization and listen to your employees, see what's working, what's not working, you're going to be left behind. So the power of the people is here, and it's here to stay.
I must say, as someone who operates in drive time radio, I'm so pleased to see the traffic back again, because it's one of our key markets. But I completely understand what you're saying. It does feel like, we just, that's it, and we're going back to the way things always were. And I think there is now an expectation, because we've seen that we can be just as productive and just as effective. And I think that's the bottom line here. There was always that worry that, if people are going to work remotely, how do I know they're doing what I am paying them to do at the end of the day? But we've seen that it's become more of an output-based system, and people are actually being productive and delivering. So, if I have that conversation with my employer and say I can deliver, then why should I have to go and deliver in an office if I can deliver at home? But I like the flexibility. I like the ability to be able to say, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, come, and then come into the office for the rest of the time. Sometimes it's nice to get away from the family and the dogs and everything else.
True. There's benefits. There is benefits to coming to the office.
Absolutely. Now, and we're social beings at the end of the day. What's the difference here between, and we hear a lot of reskilling, upskilling. How are you approaching that at Altron Karabina?
Yeah. So in this climate, it's essential. So reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling, whatever skilling you want to use, it's absolutely essential. So in terms of reskilling, that really talks to, that talks to versatility. And essentially that is taking an old set of skills, but perhaps they're a redundant set of skills for a particular job, and retraining that person into a current job, a relevant job at the moment. So it's really showing versatility. If I can give an example, in our environment, we take, in our graduate program, we target graduates from the non-traditional IT areas of engineering, industrial engineering, aeronautical engineering, mining engineering, maths and stats. We take them with 1 or 2 years experience in those areas, and we take them into our graduate program and train them into data scientists or into our data area, because their way of thinking really does, it relates well and it translates well to the data area. So that's really where we practice reskilling in our area. Upskilling is really about staying current and staying relevant. So it keeps on. So again, in our environment, it's making sure our consultants have the relevant Microsoft certifications, they have relevant exposure to new technologies on client projects for deployment, etc. And cross-skilling is really where, for example, in our environment, you get one consultant, but instead of specializing in data, for example, you cross-skill them across all the Microsoft technologies. So they're easier to place and they're more billable in our environment. But all play a very, very important part in the talent game.
I thought you were referring to the new journalism, which often feels like we're cross-skilled in a bit of coding, a bit of broadcasting, a bit of writing. You've got to do it all nowadays. But that really is quite interesting. And in fact, many of the really good data scientists I've met didn't, when I asked them, what did you set out to become? I was in engineering, I was a biological engineer, I was a physicist. I didn't set out to become a data scientist, but I discovered, when I started working, that I could apply that analytical problem-solving skill set to the world of data science, and they're really making a really good go of it. So interesting to see how sometimes our career paths can take us in the most of unexpected directions as well. Emma, thank you so much. I think we've traveled through a very interesting melange of different issues around what the future of work is going to look like, and how companies can manage that most critical of their capitals. And we often talk about financial capital and capital allocation, but I think human capital at this stage of the cycle, to your earlier point, is absolutely key for those companies that want to ensure that they thrive in this new world. So Emma Durkin, Head of Human Capital at Altron Karabina, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us here on Business Talk. Take care.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.